Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new book review today. Today I have another Philip Roth novel and it's called Indignation. This was published in 2008, so it's fairly new. This particular book is the second Philip Roth novel that I have read. I've recently done a review on the first book of his I read, which was The Dying Animal, and it was kind of like a baptism of fire into Philip Roth's books, I must admit. I think I'm going to have to lay off Philip Roth for a little while, simply because his topics are a bit too confronting for me. Let's go on about what this book was about and what are some of the, I guess, life lessons I learned out of this one. A very interesting book because it has a bit of a twist. If you haven't read this book, the clue is revealed about page 54, and that's where the point where I started to read it, I had to backtrack and reread the sentence again, and I went, I'll leave it at that and I won't spoil it. In this book, Marcus Messner, who is the protagonist, is reflecting on his life. He's telling the story about his life and why he got to the predicament that he was in now, which I won't say what it was. So Marcus Messner is a young Jewish man and he's a good boy. He's the son of very hard-working parents. His father owns a kosher butcher, and he helps his father in the shop and has helped him for years. And it looks like they had a really good relationship in the younger years, but when Marcus reached a certain age, a teenager, his father started to become paranoid, and that's when both father and son used to grate on each other. And that was the point where Marcus decided to go to college, but go to a college that was further away from home so he didn't have to deal with his father. So he decided to go to a college further away and do his studies, and all he wanted to do was basically be left alone. But at college, you're expected to participate in university life, you're expected to join a fraternity, you're expected to stay in the dorms and socialize with people. And there was always this pressure on him to be able to conform to those expectations of college life, which he really didn't want any part of it. And so what had happened was he was in a dorm room and he had particular difficulties with his dorm mates, and especially one guy by the name of Flusser, who didn't allow him to sleep well at night because he would play his music, kind of like typical things, you know, dorm life, and it would annoy the hell out of Mark. And so he would change his room and go and find another dorm mate, where he found Elwin, and engineer Elwin this time wasn't Jewish, but he was someone who was very silent, who just hardly spoke to Marcus whatsoever. So Marcus then didn't have any of a social connection with his dorm mate. And this also would grate on him too. During this time, he would also be visited by various fraternity groups who would knock on his door and actually ask him to consider joining their fraternity, but he didn't want anything to do with it. And at this stage, he decided that, you know, even staying with Elwin in the room, who hardly ever spoke to him, it was like he wasn't even there. He decided to actually leave and go and find one of the dirtiest, dingiest, most horrible rooms in the college, up high in an attic somewhere with spiders and cobwebs and dust, just to get away. It was that much that he did not want to conform or participate. However, there were expectations at the university, and an example was that in order to pass, you had to attend chapel 40 times during the year, which obviously to a young Jewish man going to a Christian chapel was pointless. So he would query the value and query what was the meaning and the point of doing these things when all he wanted to do was study, pass his studies, and do his part-time job. Now, through this university life, he came across Olivia Hutton, who was the girlfriend. He loved Olivia, and Olivia had demons of her own. She was fighting her own mental illness, and he started to question that when he gave him a blowjob. And all of a sudden, he questioned why she did that act and did it of her own accord. And he started to question there must be something wrong with her. And so this was a very interesting, I guess, reflection on his part. He would find out then that there must be something wrong with her if she does this, especially to him, and does it so easily. So he starts to question what is going on, without realizing that the young lady had a scar on her wrist as well. And so she herself was going through some mental health, self-harm issues that he didn't question, but had somehow realized that she was, I guess, broken in her own way. Throughout the time then, he has an appendectomy, and so he needs to get his appendix out, and his mother comes over and starts stressing out that her husband is driving her mad. By this stage, his father had gone completely paranoid. Mother starts distressing over the fact that she wants a divorce, and this freaks out Marcus completely. Marcus is afraid of divorce. Marcus is afraid of going to war. Marcus is afraid of becoming a private in the Korean War. This book takes place in the 1950s during the Korean War. And Marcus is ultimately afraid of a lot of things. And so his compulsion to try and do good, be good, and try and be indignant to, I guess, the conformities that is around him, and just for him to do his own thing, he's a frightened man. Olivia and his mother get to know each other at the hospital, but Marcus is pulled aside by his mother, who, even though treats Olivia quite cordially, warns him about not getting involved with this girl, simply because she has her own weaknesses. And I think for me, the scenes around the hospital bed and around his mother also advising Marcus on what to do and how not to get involved with certain people was a real eye-opener, because at times I thought, crap, this is what we do normally in everyday life as well. We are concerned about the types of problems that we're taking on, other people's problems. And she made it quite obvious that, you know, with quotes like, you never know what goes on in other people's houses. So she was actually warning Marcus not to get involved with Olivia, because he's going to take on problems that he may not need or want, or might not be really be aware of. She would say that, you know, other people's weaknesses destroy you, and as much as their strength also can as well. So really insightful stuff, and things that kind of didn't sit well with me initially, but you kind of understand where she's coming from, because we get warnings like this in our normal everyday life where we know something's not quite right. We know the people who are not quite right for us. We know the situations that there might be. And it takes a really strong person to kind of put that aside and be with these people who have issues in their own lives. There is a part in the book, especially towards the end, that really, I thought it was the most frightening in the book, and it was this concept of a panty raid. And I had to look it up because I had heard of these panty raids and had seen them in these 1980s blokey movies, those American teen movies where they break into the female dorms and they rifle through the female drawers, getting women's undies and throwing them out the window and doing God knows what else to them. This was a very frightening part of the book that I'd read. Similarly, because I had been involved in not panty raids, but different aspects of, I guess, a lot of men doing things in a big group setting where you simply had to hide away or close and lock the doors behind you and hope that things didn't go awry. So I had been in situations like that before, and so reading about the panty raids was really actually quite shocking. I realized that they were a part of things, you know, they were a part of, I guess, American society or American college life. And especially in the 1960s, there was a panty raid in the US, which made news. Of course, it should make news. It's actually quite a frightening concept. So for me, though, the Panty Raid and this whole idea of men breaking loose was all about, I think, mainly rebellion out of having to conform to society aspects, about becoming cannon fodder for the Korean War. It would have been a very difficult time, not one that I would understand. There is one part of the book where someone from the school, the education department, comes in and actually tells off the young men afterwards, saying that there is a war going on, there is a Korean War, there are men dying, and yet on the one hand they're doing that is happening, and then on the other hand these young men are going absolutely ballistic, doing horrible things and frightening the women and actually putting society backwards in a big way. So I think Indignation for me was a real eye-opener. For the life lessons for this, for me, the indignation came from the fact that Marcus really didn't want to conform to societal expectations of the time. He really wanted to be left alone. And I would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I don't understand why they didn't let him just do his own thing. After all, he's entitled to it. But at the same time, it comes across that, you know, in society we also have a need to kind of pay lip service, I guess, or do. It's really hard to say. We can follow the rules and yet we don't have to follow the rules. We can pretend that we're following the rules as long as it's not hurting anyone. I don't know, that kind of feeling. And that came across quite well when he learns that other people are actually paying proxies to go to the chapel on their behalf. And Marcus does everything by the book. He does everything correctly. And so when he realizes that, oh my God, there are other people actually paying others to go to chapel, why didn't I think about it? But then when he does that, it just sets off a big catastrophic series of events that culminates into the end of the book. And that you start to wonder, well, should he have stuck to his guns? Should he have should he just have followed, you know, and conformed and done what he thought he should have done? If he just went to chapel and did what he had to do, he wouldn't have had these issues. A really interesting book that kind of brings up questions of, you know, in life, do you play by the book? Do you not follow the rules? Do you play by the book and then still kind of pretend doing your own thing or not? And it was really interesting in that sense, because for me, I know throughout my life I've attempted to be as moral and ethical, live a good life, do the right decisions, have the right decisions that benefit me and for my family and friends, because I have this image that if I look into the mirror every morning, I want that image that comes back to me, that I think, yes, I've done good by people, I've done good by myself, I've lived a moral and ethical life, and that somehow the choices that I make do not end up hurting other people, and most of all, do not end up hurting me. This book is really an exemplification of someone who had that thinking, and yet he was pushed and pulled by others who didn't, and in so doing, then his demise came up. So, very interesting book by Philip Roth. That was Indignation. If you have any comments about this book, if you have read this book, if you have any other ideas or suggestions about Philip Roth books that I should read, please let me know. I'm going to take a break from Philip Roth for now because he is a little bit too confronting, and I'm going to go on to a completely different book, which is going to be, you're not going to guess this, you'll never guess this, The Darling Buds of May by H.E. Bates. How different to this other book. Right, okay, that's it. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Bye for now.